Eric's hands trembled as he stared at the notification hovering above his wristcom. The holographic message pulsed with a soft blue glow, its words unmistakable. Congratulations! You have been selected for the New Earth University Interstellar Exchange Housing Program. Holy shit, he whispered, slumping against the wall of the crowded campus corridor. Other students rushed past, their own wristcoms blinking with rejected applications. The housing crisis had hit hard this semester. Half the engineering department was still scrambling for beds. His excitement lasted precisely 37 seconds. That's when the second message appeared. Your assigned roommate will be a Level 3 cleared non-terrestrial student. Please review the attached xenological sensitivity guidelines. Oh no, Eric's stomach dropped. No. The rest of his day passed in a blur of classes and mounting anxiety. By evening, he found himself standing outside the gleaming glass facade of Hawking Hall, the university's brand new interspecial dormitory. The building stretched 20 stories into the purple sunset, its architecture an impossible blend of human and alien design principles. ID confirmed. Welcome, Eric Fletcher. The building's AI chirped as he approached the entrance. Your room is 1742. Your roommate has already arrived. Already? His heart rate spiked. The message said they weren't due until tomorrow. The elevator ride felt endless. Eric rehearsed his greeting, trying to remember the xenological sensitivity training videos he'd skimmed. Don't make direct eye contact with Centaurians. No sudden movements around Proximans. Never show teeth to a... The elevator doors opened directly into his new apartment, and Eric's carefully prepared speech died in his throat. His new roommate stood by the window, her back turned to him. Long, iridescent hair cascaded down her back, shifting through impossible shades of blue and violet that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. When she turned, Eric forgot how to breathe. Her skin was the color of Earth's summer sky, marked with subtle patterns that caught the light like opals. Her eyes were huge, silver white with no pupils, yet somehow managing to convey both intelligence and amusement as she studied him. You must be Eric, she said, her voice musical and perfectly accented. I'm Rilara, third-year quantum engineering student from Proxima Centauri B. She crossed the room with fluid grace and extended her hand in what was clearly a practiced human greeting. Eric shook it automatically, noting how warm her skin felt. I thought you weren't coming until tomorrow? Oh, the transport arrived early. I hope you don't mind. I've already arranged our sleeping space according to traditional protocols. Our... what? Rilara gestured to what had previously been two separate beds. They were now pushed together in the center of the room, draped with shimmering fabrics in various shades of blue and silver. I know humans typically maintain separate sleeping areas, she said as if explaining something to a child. But on my world, roommates always share sleeping space. It's essential for building proper trust bonds and maintaining healthy quantum resonance between cohabitating individuals. Eric opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's not... we can't... Oh, don't worry, Rilara beamed. I've studied human physiology extensively. Your species' sleep cycles are quite compatible with ours, though you do tend to move around more. The resonance field should help with that. She walked over to the bed and adjusted something that made the air shimmer slightly. See? I've already calibrated the field to account for your biological readings. Though we'll need to synchronize our breathing patterns before sleep, of course. Shall we practice now? Eric backed toward the elevator. I need to check something with housing about the breathing. Oh, excellent initiative. Rilara clapped her hands together. While you're there, could you ask them about thermal regulation protocols? Human body temperature runs a bit cool for optimal resonance, but I'm sure we can adjust. The elevator doors couldn't close fast enough. Eric sagged against the wall, his heart pounding. What had he gotten himself into? The housing office was closed, of course. He spent an hour wandering the campus grounds, trying to process his situation. When he finally returned, he found Rilara sitting cross-legged on their merged beds, surrounded by floating holographic diagrams. Eric, perfect timing. I've been reviewing proper alignment techniques for mixed species sleeping arrangements. Would you prefer the north-south or east-west orientation? The magnetic fields of your planet make it somewhat more complicated than at home, but Relara, Eric interrupted, summoning every ounce of diplomacy he could muster. On Earth, roommates don't share beds. It's not done. She tilted her head, genuine confusion crossing her features. But how do you establish proper neural synchronization? We don't. We just sleep. Separately. That sounds terribly inefficient. She frowned. No wonder human technological development has been so limited. Without proper sleep resonance, how do you maintain quantum coherence in your shared living spaces? We manage somehow, Eric said dryly. Look, I appreciate your traditions, but I really need my own bed. Relara's hair darkened slightly, the first sign he'd seen that her coloring really did shift with her emotions. Are you saying you don't want to establish a proper trust bond? I'm saying I want to sleep in my own bed. But that's so lonely. The genuine concern in her voice made him pause. On my world, sleeping alone is a punishment reserved for the most serious criminals. The psychological damage, I'm not going to suffer psychological damage from having my own bed. You don't know that, she said seriously. Human studies of sleep resonance are extremely primitive. Without proper monitoring of your quantum state during rest cycles, Eric grabbed a pillow from the merged beds and stormed toward the couch. I'm sleeping out here, but the couch isn't properly aligned with the planet's magnetic field. The disruption to your circadian rhythms alone could. He pulled the pillow over his head, trying to drown out her increasingly detailed lecture on the dangers of magnetically unaligned sleep positions. It was going to be a very long semester. At least let me set up a minimal resonance field around the couch, Relara called after him, just to prevent total quantum decoherence. Eric groaned into his pillow. Above him, he could hear her muttering in her native language as she adjusted various invisible fields he was pretty sure he didn't believe in. The worst part was he was already fascinated by her peculiar mix of advanced scientific knowledge and completely alien cultural assumptions. Despite his irritation, he found himself wanting to understand her perspective, even as he refused to sleep in what she dubbed their quantum resonance chamber. He was so screwed. Eric Fletcher! Relara's voice jolted him awake the next morning. Your quantum coherence readings are absolutely abysmal. Eric cracked one eye open to find her hovering over him, holding some sort of crystalline device that hummed softly. Her hair had shifted to a concerned shade of deep indigo, and she wore what appeared to be standard NEU student attire, albeit with several mysterious additions that pulsed with soft light. Time's it, he mumbled. 0647 Earth Standard, and your cellular resonance is completely out of alignment with the local quantum field. She thrust the crystal toward him. Look at these readings. Eric sat up, rubbing his neck. The couch hadn't done his back any favors. Relara, I told you, humans don't need quantum whatever. That's exactly what someone with severe quantum misalignment would say. She perched on the arm of the couch, her proximity sending a wave of warmth through his side. We really must do something about this. I can't have my roommate suffering from desynchronization. Before he could protest, she pressed her palm against his forehead. A tingling sensation spread through his body, followed by an odd sense of lightness. Hey! He jerked back, nearly falling off the couch. What was that? Basic resonance adjustment. She beamed at him. Feel better? The frustrating thing was, he did. His neck pain had vanished, and his mind felt surprisingly clear despite the early hour. That's not the point, he stammered. You can't just go around touching people and doing quantum things to them. Relara's hair shifted to a puzzled azure. Why not? The results are clearly beneficial. Your cortical readings are already showing improvement. Because? Eric stood up, trying to put some distance between them. Because humans have personal space. Boundaries. We don't just touch each other without permission. Ah, yes, the famous human personal space concept. She made air quotes with her fingers, a gesture she'd clearly learned but hadn't quite mastered. I've studied this extensively. Your species maintains arbitrary physical distances based on social relationships, despite clear evidence that closer proximity improves both psychological and quantum well-being. She followed him to the kitchenette, either missing or ignoring his attempt to create distance. For instance, your heart rate increases when I move closer, indicating elevated awareness and engagement. Yet you resist the very proximity that could help regulate such responses. Eric fumbled with the coffee maker, very aware of her presence just behind him. My heart rate increases because you're making me nervous. Exactly, she clapped her hands. Nervous system activation is the first step in establishing proper resonance. We're making progress already. He turned to argue, but she was right there, her silver eyes wide with enthusiasm, a strand of her color-shifting hair brushing his arm. The contact sent another wave of that strange, tingling sensation through him. He swallowed hard. I need coffee. Oh, yes, the human stimulant ritual. I'd love to participate. She produced 2 mugs from somewhere, both decorated with complex swirling patterns. These are quantum-aligned drinking vessels from my homeworld. They should help stabilize the beverage's molecular structure. Eric stared at the mugs. They seemed to shimmer slightly, the patterns shifting in ways that made his eyes hurt. I'll stick with my regular mug, thanks. But, regular mug. Relara's hair darkened slightly. You're very resistant to improvement, Eric Fletcher. I'm resistant to having my entire life reorganized by alien quantum magic. It's not magic, it's basic cross-dimensional resonance theory. Would you like me to explain the underlying principles? I have some excellent diagrams. No diagrams. No quantum mugs. No touching. No shared beds. Just normal roommate stuff. She tilted her head. Define normal roommate stuff. You know, studying separately, eating separately, sleeping separately, maintaining healthy boundaries. That sounds terribly inefficient, she frowned. And lonely. No wonder humans progress so slowly in their studies. Without proper quantum alignment, how do you maintain optimal information absorption? The coffee maker beeped. Eric grabbed his very normal, non-quantum mug and filled it, trying to ignore how Relara's hair had shifted to what he was beginning to recognize as her concerned about inferior human practices color. We manage, he said, taking a long sip. Look, I appreciate that you're trying to help, but he broke off as Relara suddenly stepped directly into his personal space, her face inches from his. Your pupils are dilating, she observed, and your quantum field is fluctuating most interestingly. Are you sure you don't want me to stabilize it? Eric's coffee sloshed as he backed away. I'm sure, very sure, completely sure. Fascinating. She produced a small device and began taking readings. Your field actually becomes more chaotic when I approach. Yet there is a harmonic undertone that suggests potential compatibility. With proper alignment techniques, I have class, Eric blurted, although his first lecture wasn't for 2 hours. Important class, very important, about engineering things. He practically ran for the elevator, Relara's voice following him. We'll continue our resonance work this evening. I'll prepare the quantum harmonization chamber. As the doors closed, Eric caught a glimpse of her beginning to rearrange the furniture according to what he assumed were more optimal quantum alignments. He had a feeling his attempt at maintaining boundaries was going to be a losing battle. The worst part, a small, traitorous part of him, was actually looking forward to finding out what a quantum harmonization chamber might be. Eric spent his entire quantum mechanics class unable to focus on anything except the lingering tingling sensation where Relara had touched him. Professor Zhang's lecture on particle entanglement kept morphing into thoughts about resonance fields and shifting hair colors. Quantum coherence requires precise alignment of, the professor droned. Eric's mind wandered to how Relara's eyes had sparkled when she talked about the same topic. She'd probably have fascinating insights into. He shook his head. Bad direction. Fletcher! Professor Zhang's voice snapped him back. Perhaps you'd like to explain the principle to the class? Eric felt his face heat up as the class turned to stare at him. A soft chime from his wristcom saved him. His eyes widened at the message floating above it. Your quantum field desynchronization is affecting your focus. I can sense it from across campus. Come home immediately for emergency resonance therapy. Several students giggled, The message was projecting at full size, visible to everyone nearby. "Mr. Fletcher," Professor Zhang said dryly, "while I'm sure your resonance therapy is very important, perhaps you could keep your personal messages private during class." Eric wanted to sink through the floor. He mumbled an apology and fled as soon as class ended, his face burning. When he returned to the apartment, he found Relara had rearranged the entire living room into what looked like a meditation space, complete with floating crystals and shimmering energy fields. "Your embarrassment was broadcasting across half the campus," she said by way of greeting. "We really must work on your emotional quantum containment." "You can't just send messages like that during class," Eric protested. "People will think, they'll assume—" "Think what?" Relara asked innocently, though there was something in her silver eyes that made him wonder if she was quite as naive as she appeared. "They'll think we're—" He gestured vaguely. "You know, engaging in proper roommate resonance practices? That's not what humans call it." "Oh!" She stepped closer, her hair shifting to a shade he hadn't seen before. Something between midnight blue and starlight. "What do humans call it?" Eric's mouth went dry. The scent of her was distracting. Something alien but oddly intoxicating, like ozone and starlight. That's not... I mean, your heart rate is elevating again," she observed, taking another step closer. "And your quantum field is displaying fascinating harmonic patterns. Perhaps we should investigate this response more thoroughly?" Part of him wanted to say yes, a very large part, if he was honest. The way she moved, the impossible colors of her hair, those silvery eyes that seemed to see right through him. "I need to study," he blurted, backing away. "Lots of studying. Important studying." "Excellent." Relara clapped her hands. "I've prepared the optimal studying configuration. We can align our mental frequencies for maximum information absorption." Before he could protest, she had grabbed his hand and pulled him down onto one of the cushions scattered across the floor. The contact sent another wave of that tingling sensation up his arm, and this time it lingered. "Now," she said, settling gracefully beside him, very close beside him. "First we synchronize our breathing, then I'll help you access the quantum knowledge plane." "I don't think humans can access quantum knowledge planes," Eric said weakly, very aware of her knee brushing against his. "Not with that attitude," she chided. "Now close your eyes and focus on the resonance between us." Eric closed his eyes, telling himself he was just humoring her. But as their breathing fell into sync, he began to feel something, a subtle vibration, a sense of connection that went beyond the physical. "There," Relara murmured, her voice taking on a musical quality that made his spine tingle. "You're beginning to align. Your resistance is decreasing." "I'm not resistant," he protested automatically, then realized that might not have been the best choice of words. "No?" Her voice held a hint of amusement. "Then perhaps we should move on to more advanced resonance practices?" Eric's eyes snapped open. She was looking at him with an expression that suggested she knew exactly what effect she was having on him. "I thought this was about studying," he managed. "Everything is connected through the quantum field," she said serenely. But there was definitely a glimmer of mischief in those silver eyes, including attraction and resonance. We're not." He scrambled to his feet. "I need air." As he fled to the elevator again, he heard her laughing softly. The sound followed him down 18 floors, along with the lingering sensation of her presence. He was so screwed. That evening, Eric found himself unable to face another night on the couch. His back ached, and the memory of Relara's resonance therapy kept floating through his mind. He stood in the doorway of their shared room, watching her adjust what she called the quantum harmonization field around the merged beds. "The alignment is perfect now," she said without turning around. "Your discomfort is broadcasting quite clearly through the quantum field." "I'm not broadcasting anything," Eric muttered, but he rubbed his neck self-consciously. Relara turned, her hair rippling through shades of deep blue that reminded him of the ocean at midnight. "Your species carries so much tension in your physical form." She glided toward him. "Let me help." Before he could protest, her fingers found his shoulders, and that now familiar tingling sensation spread through his muscles. The knots of tension began to dissolve under her touch. That's not fair, he managed, trying to ignore how good it felt. What isn't fair? Her voice held a hint of teasing. Helping my roommate achieve proper quantum alignment? You know exactly what you're doing, Eric accused, though he didn't pull away. Do I? Her fingers traced a pattern up his neck that made him shiver. Perhaps you could explain it to me? These human concepts of fairness are so intriguing. Eric turned to face her, intending to establish some boundaries once and for all. But she was right there, those silver eyes twinkling with barely suppressed mischief, her hair now shifting through shades that seemed to mirror his own racing pulse. You're enjoying this, he realized. Enjoying what? She tilted her head innocently, but her hair betrayed her, flickering with sparks of what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. Driving me crazy with all this quantum stuff. Is that what I'm doing? She stepped closer, and the air between them seemed to hum with energy. And here I thought I was simply following traditional roommate protocols. There's nothing traditional about this, Eric said hoarsely. No? Her hand came up to trace the line of his jaw, sending shivers of electricity through his skin. Then perhaps we should establish our own traditions? Later, Eric would never be quite sure who moved first. One moment they were standing there, tension crackling between them like one of Relara's quantum fields. The next, they were kissing, and everything he thought he knew about physics seemed to reorganize itself around the feel of her lips on his. It was like touching starlight. Energy coursed through him, making his skin tingle and his head spin. Her hair wrapped around them both, creating a curtain of shifting colors that pulsed in time with their heartbeats. When they finally broke apart, Relara's entire body was glowing softly, her hair a cascade of impossible colors. Well, she said, slightly breathless, that was an interesting quantum interaction. Eric couldn't help laughing. Is that what you're calling it? Would you prefer a more technical term? The resonance patterns were quite... He kissed her again, just to see what colors her hair would turn this time. The answer, it turned out, was all of them at once. I suppose, she murmured against his lips, this means you're ready to discuss proper sleeping arrangements. I'm still not sure about your quantum field theory, Eric said, though he was finding it increasingly hard to remember why he'd been so resistant. Then perhaps, Relara's eyes sparkled, we should conduct some thorough experiments. For science, of course. For science, Eric agreed solemnly, then grinned. But I'm keeping my own quantum mug. Her laughter filled the room like music, and her hair wrapped around them both in a shower of starlight. The quantum-aligned bed didn't look quite so intimidating anymore. Relara had dimmed the room's lights, leaving only the soft glow from what she called harmonic crystals scattered around the space. Her hair cast shifting patterns across the walls, creating an otherworldly ambiance that felt strangely right. The field is optimally calibrated for dual-species resonance, she said, her voice softer than usual. Though I suspect we've already achieved considerable alignment. Eric felt his face heat up, remembering their earlier experiment in quantum interaction. Is that your scientific assessment? Oh no, her eyes sparkled with mischief. My scientific assessment would require much more thorough data collection. She patted the space beside her on the bed. The shimmering fabric seemed to ripple in response, creating patterns that drew the eye and made Eric's head spin slightly. I still think your quantum field theory is questionable, he said, even as he found himself moving closer. Humans, Relara sighed dramatically, her hair flickering with amusement, always needing empirical evidence. She reached for his hand, sending that now familiar tingle through his skin. Shall we gather some data? Eric let her pull him down onto the bed. The moment he lay back, he felt something. A subtle vibration, a sense of connection that went beyond the physical. He blinked, surprised. What is that? Quantum resonance, Relara murmured, curling against his side. Her hair spread across them both like a living blanket of starlight. Or as your species might say, chemistry. Her smile held a hint of triumph, and Eric couldn't help laughing. You're never going to let me live down my resistance to all this, are you? Never, she agreed cheerfully, though I'm open to negotiations regarding compensation for my wounded feelings. Her hair was doing that thing again, shifting through colors that made his breath catch. The patterns seemed to match the beating of their hearts, creating a visual symphony that was both alien and intimately familiar. You know, Eric said, tracing a pattern along her arm that made her skin shimmer. For scientific accuracy, we should probably run multiple trials of this experiment. Relara's eyes gleamed silver in the crystal light. What an excellent suggestion, Mr. Fletcher. Shall we begin the first trial? Eric couldn't remember exactly how he ended up in Relara's embrace. Everything had felt so natural, as if unseen forces he'd only read about in books had gently pushed them together. Her hair, shimmering in shades of starlight, softly enveloped them, creating the sensation of a cocoon that shielded them from the rest of the world. Do you still doubt the theory of quantum resonance? She teased, her voice a soft whisper as she lay beside him. Her fingers brushed his arm lightly, leaving a warm, almost electric sensation in their wake. I do, he replied with a smirk, but I'm open to additional experiments. She laughed, a sound both gentle and musical, like a reflection of her essence. There was something enchanting in that laugh, something that made him forget everything else. Her silver shimmering eyes gazed at him as if they could see all the hidden corners of his soul. Then I must convince you, Mr. Fletcher, she murmured, her voice dropping to a barely audible whisper, full of playful intrigue. The night passed in a haze of extraordinary closeness. What began as gentle touches and soft exchanges of words soon turned into something much deeper. With each passing moment, they rediscovered one another, breaking down barriers built by their different worlds. It was more than just physical. It was the intertwining of their very beings, almost like the quantum alignment she so often spoke of. When they finally paused, her hair glowed with a soft, steady light that seemed to reflect their shared state, calm, unity, and something greater that was yet to be fully understood. Eric looked at her, feeling the boundary between their worlds dissolve. Her skin, glowing in hues of a summer sky, was surprisingly warm. He reached out to brush a stray strand of her hair from her face. You planned all this, didn't you? He asked, barely hiding a grin. Was it necessary? She replied with a light chuckle. I think we both knew where this was going. Maybe. He fell silent, gazing into her eyes. But that doesn't make it any less amazing. She leaned closer, and their lips met again, this time without words, without science or theories. Just two beings finding each other in an infinite universe. The night grew still, and the glow of her hair continued to shimmer, like tiny stars trapped in the shared world they had created. The last of the harmonic crystals dimmed on their own, leaving only the glow of Relara's hair painting colors across the darkness. And if anyone in the adjacent apartments noticed unusual quantum fluctuations that night, well, that was just proper roommate resonance, wasn't it? Morning light filtered through the quantum-tinted windows of their shared room, casting prismatic patterns across the tangled sheets. Eric woke to find Relara already up, her hair a thoughtful shade of deep azure as she studied multiple floating holograms. She quickly dismissed them when she noticed him stirring. Too quickly. Sleep resonance optimal? She asked brightly. Too brightly. Eric sat up, studying her carefully. After 3 weeks of sharing not just a room but a bed, for purely quantum alignment purposes, of course, he'd learned to read her subtle tells. The way her hair rippled with barely suppressed tension, the too-perfect cadence of her speech. What aren't you telling me? Many things, she replied with typical Relaran directness. The complete quantum mechanics of star formation, the proper pronunciation of my family name in all 7 dimensions, the recipe for Relara. Her hair flickered briefly to a shade he'd never seen before, something between worry and guilt. It's nothing of consequence, simply some routine communications from home. At 3 a.m. Earth Standard Time, Eric had noticed her receiving these routine messages with increasing frequency. She always dismissed the holograms before he could see them clearly. Right, he said, climbing out of bed. Just like you're just a regular exchange student? I am an exchange student. She busied herself adjusting their bed's quantum field, another tell. Who happens to know more about Earth customs than most humans? I study thoroughly and has access to technology way beyond standard student issue? My family believes in proper educational equipment. Eric crossed the room to stand before her, and receives coded messages at all hours from what I'm pretty sure is the Proximan diplomatic frequency. That got her attention. Her hair stilled completely, something he'd only seen once before. You've been monitoring the frequencies? I'm an engineering student, remember? Signal analysis is kind of my thing. He reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. What's really going on, Rilara? She was saved from answering by an alert from his wristcom. Emergency lab session in 10 minutes. The quantum particle accelerator, Eric swore. Professor Zhang will kill me if I'm late again. We'll continue this discussion later, Rilara promised, but her hair had taken on that too bright hue again. Eric wanted to press further, but he really couldn't afford another demerit in Zhang's class. He rushed through his morning routine and headed for the lab, his mind still turning over Rilara's evasions. He was so distracted that he almost missed the warning signs. The subtle vibration in the accelerator's containment field. The slight discoloration in the quantum matrix. Almost. But before he could react, something slammed into him from behind, knocking him clear as the containment field collapsed in a burst of energy that would have reduced him to his component atoms. He hit the ground hard, rolling with the impact. When he looked up, Rilara was crouched over him, her body glowing with barely contained power. Her hair whipped around them both in a protective corona that seemed to bend light itself. The lab's emergency systems kicked in, containing the breach. But Eric barely noticed, transfixed by the sight of Rilara in her true form, or at least closer to it than he'd ever seen. Are you all right? She demanded, her voice carrying harmonics that made his bones vibrate. You move faster than physically possible, he managed. And that shield, that's way beyond anything Earth physics can explain. Around them, other students were picking themselves up, staring at Rilara with a mixture of awe and fear. She seemed to notice their audience for the first time, and her glow quickly dimmed back to its usual levels. We should get you to medical, she said, helping him up. But Eric didn't miss how every recording device in the lab had mysteriously malfunctioned during the incident. Rilara, later, she said firmly, when we're somewhere more private. But later never seemed to come. Over the next few days, Rilara grew increasingly distracted, spending hours in private communication with her homeworld. Eric caught glimpses of official-looking figures in the holograms, speaking in a language that made his ears hurt. Then the news broke. Interspecies romance? First official human Proximan coupling? The headline blazed across every newsfeed in the system. Beneath it was a photo of Eric and Rilara, clearly taken without their knowledge, showing them in what the caption called an intimate quantum alignment session. They'd been getting coffee. Eric's wristcom exploded with messages. His parents, his friends, random strangers wanting interviews. And in the middle of it all, Rilara stood by the window, her hair a storm of conflicting colors. I suppose, she said quietly, we should have that talk now. You're not just an exchange student, Eric said. It wasn't a question. No, Rilara admitted, her hair settling into a deep, midnight blue he'd never seen before. Though my studies are genuine, as are other things. She turned from the window to face him, and for the first time, Eric saw something like uncertainty in those silver eyes. I am the daughter of the Proximan High Counselor, she said, sent here not just to study, but to evaluate the possibility of deeper connections between our species. Eric felt like he'd been punched in the gut. So this whole thing, us, it was all just some diplomatic experiment? No! Her hair flared with intensity. The assignment was simply to observe, to live among humans, to determine if our species could truly coexist. What happened between us? She stepped closer, reaching for him. That was never part of the plan. Eric backed away. Really? Because according to these news feeds, I'm part of some grand diplomatic initiative. The first step toward true interspecies union, they're calling it. Politics, Rilara spat the word with surprising venom. Always trying to quantify and categorize things that should remain in the quantum realm of possibility? Is that what I am to you? A possibility? You know better than that. Her voice carried those subtle harmonics that always made his spine tingle. You've felt our resonance. That can't be faked or manufactured. Before Eric could respond, a new hologram blazed to life in the center of the room. A stern-looking Proximate official, their hair a rigid shade of formal silver, stared at them both. Daughter, the figure said, you have exceeded your observational mandate. Father, Rilara's posture shifted subtly, becoming more formal. I was about to contact you. The Council is concerned about these developments. Your involvement with the human has attracted unnecessary attention. The timeline for diplomatic relations must be carefully managed. The timeline? Eric interrupted. Diplomacy be damned. Is that what you call people's lives? The High Counselor's gaze shifted to him, and Eric felt the weight of centuries of alien authority bearing down on him. You must understand, young human, that the integration of our species requires careful... No, Rilara said quietly. Both Eric and her father turned to stare at her. No? The High Counselor's hair shifted to a dangerous shade of deep purple. You sent me here to understand humans, Rilara said, her voice gaining strength. Well, I understand this. They cannot be quantified by your diplomatic equations. Their chaos, their passion, their ability to shift between quantum states of emotion, these are not weaknesses to be managed, but strengths to be embraced. She moved to stand beside Eric, her hand finding his. The contact sent familiar tingles up his arm, but now he understood it was more than just alien biology. It was her, deliberately sharing her energy with him. What I have with Eric isn't part of your diplomatic initiative, she continued. It's proof that our species can connect on levels your careful plans never considered. The High Counselor's expression was unreadable. You would risk centuries of diplomatic planning for feelings? I would risk everything for the truth, Rilara said simply. And the truth is, Father, that love doesn't follow diplomatic protocols. The word hung in the air between them all. Love. They hadn't said it before, not even in private. But now it was out there, broadcast across quantum frequencies to one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The High Counselor's hologram flickered for a long moment before responding. Your emotional investment is noted, daughter. However, the Council requires your immediate return for consultation. No, Eric found himself saying. The word surprised even him. She stays. The High Counselor's hair shifted to an alarming shade of crimson. You dare! I dare because I love her, Eric interrupted, squeezing Rilara's hand. Not the diplomatic potential she represents, not the quantum alignment or whatever official terms you want to put on it. I love her chaos, her brilliance, the way she sees the world like no one else could. Rilara's hair erupted in a cascade of colors he'd never seen before, pulsing with an inner light that filled the room. And she turned to face her father directly, love him precisely because he would stand up to you like this. Because he challenges everything we thought we knew about humans. Because he accepted me, all of me, even when he didn't understand what I was. The energy between them crackled visibly now, their quantum fields merging in ways that probably violated several laws of physics. The High Counselor observed them silently, their expression unreadable. Finally, they spoke. The Council will need to evaluate this development. Evaluate all you want, Rilara said, but I'm staying right here. After the hologram faded, Eric turned to her. Did we just declare our love and possibly start an interstellar incident in the same conversation? Technically, Rilara's hair sparkled with amusement, we created several quantum-level disruptions in the diplomatic field, potentially altered the course of human-Proximate relations, and definitely violated at least 3 official protocols. Her eyes met his. Worth it? Instead of answering, Eric pulled her close and kissed her. The contact sent waves of energy coursing through them both, her hair wrapping around them in a cocoon of living light. When they finally broke apart, Rilara's whole body was glowing. Your quantum alignment techniques have improved significantly, she teased. I had a good teacher. Eric brushed a strand of her color-shifting hair from her face. Though I'm still not sure about all this resonance field stuff. No? Her eyes sparkled. Perhaps we should conduct more thorough experiments. For diplomatic purposes, of course. Of course, Eric agreed solemnly. Can't risk an interstellar incident due to insufficient data. They barely made it back to their quantum-aligned bed before her hair started doing that thing again, the one that made the air itself seem to sing with possibility. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets that shimmered with residual energy, Eric asked, "What happens now?" Rilara propped herself up on one elbow, her hair casting gentle patterns across his skin. Now we face the combined diplomatic pressure of two civilizations, navigate unprecedented cultural territories, and potentially reshape the future of human-proximan relations. Sounds complicated. Extremely. She smiled. Good thing we have optimal quantum alignment on our side. Eric pulled her close, marveling at how the universe had led him here, to this impossible girl with her quantum theories and color-changing hair, who had turned his ordinary life into something extraordinary. The Proximan diplomatic vessel materialized above New Earth University with all the subtlety of a quantum supernova. Its crystalline structure caught the morning light, sending rainbow cascades across the campus and thoroughly disrupting Eric's attempt at a normal breakfast. "Your family certainly knows how to make an entrance," he said to Rilara, who was watching the ship with an uncharacteristically still posture. "The High Council believes in proper protocol." Her hair had taken on that formal silver shade that Eric had learned to associate with diplomatic stress. "Though I suspect this is more about intimidation than tradition." Before Eric could respond, their apartment's quantum field rippled, and suddenly the room was full of tall, elegant Proximans. Their ceremonial robes seemed to bend light itself, and their collective hair created an aurora of shifting colors that made Eric's eyes water. At their center stood the High Counselor, somehow even more imposing in person than via hologram. "Daughter," they said in a voice that carried harmonics of authority, "we must discuss your situation." Rilara's hand found Eric's, their quantum fields automatically synchronizing in a way that made several of the diplomatic entourage's hair flicker with surprise. "There is nothing to discuss, Father," Rilara said. "I have made my choice. The Council has approved the Interspecies Union Program," her father continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The ceremony will be held tomorrow evening. All major galactic media will be present to witness this historic—" "No!" Rilara and Eric said simultaneously. The synchronization of their fields amplified the word, making the windows vibrate slightly. The High Counselor's hair shifted to that dangerous purple shade again. "This is not a request, daughter. The political implications are precisely why we refuse," Rilara interrupted. "What we have isn't a political statement. It's real, and we won't let you turn it into propaganda." "You think your feelings matter more than centuries of diplomatic planning?" one of the counselors demanded, their hair bristling with indignation. "Yes," Eric said simply, "because what we have proves something your plans never could, that our species can connect naturally without political maneuvering." The room crackled with tension, quantum fields clashing like invisible waves. Then Rilara's mother, who had been quietly observing until now, stepped forward. "Show me," she said. "What?" The High Counselor turned to her in surprise. "Show me this connection you claim is so special." She moved closer to Eric and Rilara, her hair shifting to an analytical shade of blue. "If it's as genuine as you say, prove it." Eric felt Rilara's hand tighten in his. They had never deliberately displayed their quantum resonance before. It was something private, intimate. But now, they turned to face each other, and everything else seemed to fade away. Their fields merged with practiced ease, creating patterns of energy that made the assembled diplomats gasp. Rilara's hair erupted in cascading colors that shouldn't have been possible, while Eric's normally invisible human quantum field became visible, intertwining with hers in complex harmonies. "Impossible," one of the counselors whispered. "A human shouldn't be capable of such resonance." "And yet," Rilara's mother said softly, "there it is." She turned to her husband. "You can't fake that kind of quantum alignment. What they have, it's beyond anything our arrangements could have achieved." The High Counselor's hair flickered through several shades of uncertainty before settling on a more contemplative hue. "Even if what you say is true, The diplomatic ceremony is already arranged. The media is expecting. Then let them expect, Relara said, her voice carrying new authority. The energy field around her and Eric pulsed stronger. We will attend your ceremony, but we will tell the truth. All of it. Her father's expression hardened. You would risk everything, Eric finished for him. Yes, because some things are worth the risk. The diplomatic entourage erupted in a chaos of shifting colors and harmonics that made Eric's head spin. Through it all, he and Relara remained connected, their fields a stable point in the storm. The next evening found them at the grand diplomatic function, surrounded by representatives from dozens of worlds. The quantum crystalline architecture of the venue made everything shimmer with possibility, but Eric only had eyes for Relara. She wore traditional Proximan diplomatic robes that seemed to capture starlight itself, her hair a confident cascade of colors that drew every eye in the room. When she took the podium, the assembled dignitaries fell silent. You came here expecting an announcement about arranged diplomatic unions? She began, her voice carrying clearly. Instead, I'm going to tell you a story about quantum mechanics and coffee mugs. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Eric couldn't help grinning. When I first arrived on Earth, I tried to impose my traditions on my human roommate. I insisted on quantum alignment and proper resonance protocols. I thought I knew exactly how integration between our species should work. Her eyes found Eric's in the crowd, and her hair shifted to that special shade that was just for him. I was wrong. What I discovered instead was that true connection, true resonance, can't be forced through diplomatic channels or political arrangements. It has to grow naturally, like quantum entanglement occurring in its own time, in its own way. She gestured to Eric, who joined her at the podium. The moment their hands touched, their fields merged visibly, creating a display that had the assembled media frantically recording. This, Relara continued, is what real integration looks like. Not arranged unions or political statements, but two beings choosing to align their quantum states because they want to, not because tradition demands it. The High Counselor stood, their hair shifting through complex patterns. And what of our traditions? Our protocols? They're important, Eric surprised himself by speaking. But maybe they need to evolve. Maybe the best traditions are the ones we choose to keep, not the ones we're forced to follow. Relara's hair sparkled with approval. My father sent me to Earth to evaluate if our species could truly coexist. Well, here's your answer. We can. Not through careful diplomatic planning, but through coffee dates and quantum physics jokes and learning to see the universe through each other's eyes. The energy between them built to a crescendo, their combined fields creating patterns that danced across the crystalline walls like aurora borealis. This is my official report to the Council, Relara announced. Human Proximan integration is not only possible, it's inevitable, but it will happen one quantum alignment at a time, one genuine connection at a time, and it will be beautiful. The silence following Relara's speech lasted exactly 3.2 seconds. Eric counted them, his engineering mind automatically tracking time even as his heart raced. Then the room erupted. Reporters from a dozen worlds shouted questions. Diplomats argued in languages that made the quantum fields ripple. Through it all, Eric and Relara stood together, their combined resonance creating a bubble of calm in the chaos. Well, the High Counselor finally said, rising from their seat. Their hair had shifted to a shade Eric had never seen before, something between acceptance and pride. It seems my daughter has managed to exceed her diplomatic mandate in the most unexpected way possible. Relara tensed beside Eric, but her father wasn't finished. Perhaps, they continued, that is exactly what both our peoples needed. The ripple of surprise through the crowd was almost visible. The High Counselor approached the podium, their formal robes shimmering. The Council recognizes this unconventional approach to cultural integration. While not our original plan, we cannot deny the evidence before us. They gestured to Eric and Relara's still-merged quantum fields. Sometimes the most effective diplomacy is the kind we don't plan. Relara's hair erupted in joyful colors. Father, however, they added with what might have been a smile, I do expect proper quantum alignment protocols to be maintained in any future family gatherings. Eric couldn't help laughing. I think we can manage that, sir. 6 months later, the quantum-aligned bed was still there, but now it was their choice to share it. The apartment had evolved into a perfect blend of human practicality and proxy man quantum aesthetics, right down to Eric's collection of regular coffee mugs displayed alongside Rilara's quantum-harmonized ones. "Your field is fluctuating again," Rilara observed one morning, her hair shifting through happy patterns as she watched Eric try to perfect his pronunciation of her family name in the 7th dimension. "Maybe I'm just distracted by my incredibly beautiful alien girlfriend who's about to be late for her own lecture." She was teaching a new course at NEU, Practical Applications of Cross-Cultural Quantum Dynamics. It had quickly become the most popular elective on campus. "The temporal quantum fields are perfectly aligned," she insisted, but she was already gathering her materials. "Though perhaps we should conduct some alignment exercises later, just to be sure." "For science?" Eric grinned. "Always for science," she agreed, kissing him quickly. The contact sent familiar tingles through them both. They had become something of a symbol on campus and beyond. The human engineer and the proximan quantum specialist who had accidentally revolutionized interstellar relations. Other mixed couples had started emerging, each finding their own way to bridge the gaps between worlds. But for Eric and Rilara, it always came back to this: their shared space, their merged quantum fields, and the simple joy of choosing each other every day. "I love you," Eric said as she headed for the door. "All 7 dimensions of you." Rilara's hair sparkled with happiness. "And I love you, even if you still can't properly align a quantum coffee mug." Some things they had learned transcended both physics and politics. Some connections defied diplomatic protocols and cultural traditions. And sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply letting love happen in its own way, at its own quantum frequency. Their story had begun with a housing lottery and an alien obsessed with quantum alignment. It had grown into something that changed 2 worlds. But in the end, it was just about them. 2 beings who found each other across the vastness of space and decided to create their own traditions, one quantum resonance at a time.